The fight to remove racist nicknames from sports teams, particularly those that refer to Native American culture, has been going on for decades. Just last year, we saw Dan Snyder, the owner of the NFL's Washington football team, finally forced to change the team name. This coming after the team's stadium title sponsor FedEx basically forced his hand. And last December, the Major League Baseball franchise in Cleveland announced finally that their team's nickname, the Indians, is a racist nickname, but not racist enough to drop it immediately. Cleveland announced the team would play as the Indians through 2021. Here with me, I'm Dexter Henry to discuss this decision, its impact, and the fight many Native Americans continue to fight to eradicate racist team nicknames is Sundance. Sundance is the executive director of the Cleveland American Indian Movement. Sundance, how are you doing, man?
I am doing fairly well. Thank you for having me.
Oh man, thank you for being here with me to have this discussion. I really appreciate it. When we look at the Cleveland baseball franchise, from the team name to its former logo, there's several issues with it, Sundance. Could you discuss why the team name and the logo over the years has absolutely been problematic?
Well, I mean, there are a number of reasons why this team name, and especially that racist logo, Wahoo, which the team continues to sell, the franchise continues to sell, is problematic. I mean, for no other reason than when you look at the socioeconomic indicators for natives in this country, we're at the very bottom of every single one. I mean, we have the lowest life expectancy, we have the lowest amount of education, we are the poorest people in the country, we have a disproportionate amount of murdered and missing indigenous girls and women. We have a high rate of incarceration. We are twice as likely as the next ethnic group to be assaulted by someone from a different ethnic group. And we represent less than 1% of the population. So we believe that, well, many of us believe that these sports mascots are an impediment to getting our real issues solved. They create stereotypes, they reinforce stereotypes, and to be honest with you, that Wahoo logo, that dead Indian head, as I like to term it, is a symbol of genocide. So for us, whenever we talk in the Northeast Ohio area about things for Native people, whenever we use the term Indians, you can see people's eyes glaze over. They're not thinking about us, they're thinking about the sports team. And, for the most part, pre-season, during the season, post-season, we hear Indians, 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 but nothing is talking about the issues that we have as indigenous.
No, you're absolutely right about that. Now, the franchise in Cleveland decided not to immediately change the name like the Washington football team that we saw last year. What did you think of that decision, Sundance? And did you look at it as an opportunity for the franchise just to be able to sell more Cleveland Indians merchandise? Because we know a lot of times when you look at stuff, you just got to follow the money and look at it there, because they consciously made the decision to not change the name this year. What did you think of that decision? Were you happy with that, that they said they would change the name but not do it in 2021?
Well, if you have followed the words from the villains, last month they came out and said, they might not change it in 2022. So for us, yes, follow the money. It is a real issue because it's exploitation. And when you talk to people in Cleveland, many of them believe that somehow they are honoring us. They don't know anything about us. They don't know anything about our issues. They don't seem to want to know anything about us or our issues, but they're happy to call themselves the tribe. Basically, the issue is that how could we justify saying to that franchise that it's okay for you to continue in the 2021 or the 2022 season using this name when we've been very vocal about how harmful this is to our children, how harmful this is to our women, how harmful this is to the general community.
I'm glad you had talked about how harmful it is to the general community of our Native American brothers and sisters. There was a 2008 series of studies that found that exposure to American Indian mascot images had a negative impact on American Indian high school and college students' feelings of personal and community worth within that community, also an achievement-related possible selves within that. So there's undoubtedly an impact on people who look like you, Sundance here. And I wanted to bring this up, and this was part of having this conversation with you, Sundance. The Indians recently, that the team with that name in Cleveland, had a Twitter post where they supported infielder Yu Chang, who's called out with anti-Asian racist social media messages he had received following an error in a game. And, while calling out the racist messages is undoubtedly the right thing to do, the post had a quote from Terry Francona that read, "Errors are a part of the game, but ignorance and racism should not be anywhere." And quite a few people on social media responded and said the team should respond to racism by changing the name immediately. I would happen to agree with that. Do you think there's a level of hypocrisy when you have a team that is called the Cleveland Indians saying that they are standing against racism, but the team name is racist?
Well, I think there is hypocrisy coming from the top. I do not believe that one individual has any power to change the team name. And from my understanding, he has been fairly vocal of late, saying that the team name should be changed. So undoubtedly, as you note, decrying racism in any form is the right thing to do, because racism against one is racism against everyone. However, you might note that Larry Dolan and, the Dolans in general, who own the team, have not come out to say that they have taken our issues seriously. From what I have heard, they want to be a leader in social justice, is the term that they used. However, social justice does not trump, apparently, the bank account. And that really is what the issue is. If progressives, whose name is on that field, would say that we believe the team name should change, you can bet that the team name would change immediately. But here in Cleveland, we live under a number of illusions. The number one illusion that I think sports fans live under is that somehow the racism that is going on at the stadium is progressive.
That is absolutely a great point in talking about the financial sponsorship and team name that is actually on the stadium and supports the team. They haven't put the pressure on the team to do that. We saw, as I mentioned earlier, how FedEx had the pressure on the Washington football team, and then they were able to change the name. You brought up this argument before, Sundance, that you've heard from people on the other side of this. And I generally don't like saying that because I don't think there's really an other side to racism. But people said, hey, this team has been around since 1915. The name hasn't offended anyone. As a Native American and person who lives in the Cleveland area, what would be your response to people who have that mindset?
I have a number of responses. Yes, the name has not offended anyone who apparently matters. So, I think we should, that's a whole different discussion. But when you look at the, say, 15 odd years that I have been active in this cause, I've heard many different people say many different things. I've heard many people say, I'm not offended by it. I've heard some Native people say, I'm not offended by it. And of course, I have heard very many Native people and our allies say that they are offended by it. And over the course of the years, here's what I've noted. Whereas I have never heard a person who said, I'm offended, turn around and tell me that they are not offended. I've heard very many people who started off saying that I'm not offended by this issue, come back to me later and apologize because they say, after listening, I am offended and you are correct.
And so obviously showing that there can be change in terms of, the ideology or thinking around this. Now, I think the thing that should be noted about this when it comes to speaking about of the Cleveland baseball franchise or the Washington football team or any other team you look at. And I think this needs to be talked about. There have been Native Americans and indigenous people fighting against this, as I said at the top, for decades. And we've seen teams, particularly college and high school teams, Sundance, over the past 40 odd so years, get rid of team names and logos that are racist, specifically to Native American history. So I get my question to you, and I know you might not be able to answer this specifically, but from your experience, why do you think that sports teams, especially on the professional level, Sundance, have taken so long to make this change?
Well, I mean, there are a number of different reasons. I mean, the first and foremost area that you are aware of, sports fan is a shorthand for sports fanatic, and sports fans are notoriously superstitious. When Cleveland adopted this team name back in 1915, it should be noted that the Boston Braves had won the World Series the year before. And when you look at the articles published in the Cleveland newspapers, they were very specific that they wanted to capitalize on what they call winning Indian spirit. Now, they weren't honoring indigenous people, and Louis Sockalexis, the first openly Native person to play, Major League Baseball, was an afterthought in those articles. So it can't be said that they were making that change to honor us per se, or honor him per se. The Plain Dealer, the largest newspaper in Cleveland, had a half-page cartoon, basically denigrating indigenous people. So basically, we have had more than 100 years of this mythology that indigenous people are very good as tokens. You know, we are lucky, and that the team, the tribe, should capitalize on that. Now, Ohio is a special case because Ohio has a large number of schools, you know, secondary schools that have these mascots and team names. And so basically what we're faced with is the school system saying it's okay, and every other institution in society here saying it's okay because these people go through the school systems. So your teachers say it's okay, the principal says it's okay. Hey, your minister on Sunday says it's okay. So who am I to say that it's not? Because every person in authority here has said that this is acceptable. And that's really what the problem is. When we look at it now, you are very correct. At the collegiate level, it is no longer acceptable. And increasingly at the professional level, it is no longer acceptable, but it's still very acceptable, unfortunately, at the secondary school level. And, you know, that has to change. And when that changes, I am sure, certainly in this area, that all the team names that we are dealing with will follow.
And that kind of leads me into my final question I had for you, Sundance, which is when you look at what we saw last year with the Washington football team, and you also look at the supposed change that is supposed to come for the Cleveland baseball franchise, are you encouraged that there will be more change towards this in terms of team names, logos, imagery? And I would add to that, what do you think some of these other franchises that have names on the professional level that relate to Native American history and heritage, like the Atlanta Braves or Kansas City Chiefs, etc., what do you think should happen in those team names? Do you think we should get rid of those as well too?
No, we've been very vocal that these names have to change. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's Cleveland or Atlanta or Kansas City or Chicago. You know, they all do us a disservice for many of the reasons that I highlighted earlier. I think that yes, it's problematic. I think that, yes, it is slow coming, but am I encouraged? In the case of Cleveland, we've heard this before. Cleveland American Indian Movement filed a lawsuit back in 1972, and that lawsuit was against the baseball franchise for libel and slander, and that lawsuit went through the court system for about a decade or so. And after the owner of the team at that time passed away, his wife decided to settle. And part of that settlement was that they would get rid of Wahoo and that the team name would be phased out. Now that was back in 1984, if I recall. And what happened after that was someone else bought the team. And at that point, all bets were off. Now, in the 90s, the plain dealer decided that it was no longer going to call Cleveland baseball Indians, and it was just going to refer to them as the baseball team. And my understanding then as well is the paper changed hands and all bets were off. So we have to understand that the compromise that the franchise made with Major League Baseball was basically a gentleman's agreement. And so the question is, if the team changes hands, are all bets off? From my perspective, I will believe it when I see it. Until that time, this is all just smoke. It's easy to talk and not do anything, and that's where we are.
Well, unfortunately, Sundance, there's been a lot of talking and not a lot of action when it comes to that, and a lot of people around the sports world not listening to the voices, especially on a professional level, of our Native American brothers and sisters. Sundance, I want to thank you for coming and talking to me and having this conversation. You're the executive director of the Cleveland American Indian Movement. You guys are doing such great work. And please continue to fight, and I hope to have you come back and talk more about this conversation in a positive light when we actually see some change.
I would like that too, brother. Thank you very much.